right, Dennis, we can get started.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Galucki. Welcome to the 488th Imagine Greater Buffalo program and our 110th virtual Imagine program hosted by our wonderful Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. Thank you for joining us today. This program is created by ImagineLifelongLearning.com and the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature. C-SAAHN, as I call it. Now, before we get started, just a little housekeeping. Everyone watching will be muted and your video turned off. So if you do have a question or a comment, please type it into the chat box and we'll go through them at the end of the presentation. We are recording this program so you can watch it again later on the Downtown Central Library's Facebook page or their YouTube channels. And we hope you share the link with others. Now, on to our featured speaker, Dr. Eva M. Doyle. Dr. Doyle is a retired Buffalo Public School teacher. She received a bachelor and master's degree in elementary education from Buffalo State College. She also studied at Capella University toward a doctoral degree in educational leadership in urban schools. Although retired, Dr. Doyle continues to teach and considers the entire Western New York area her classroom. She lectures and writes extensively on topics in African American history in both city and suburban communities. Dr. Doyle is a columnist for the oldest Black newspaper in Western New York, The Criterion. Her column, Eye on History, began in the Challenger in February 1979. Recently, the auditorium at the Frankie Merriweather Library on Jefferson Avenue has been named to honor Dr. Eva M. Doyle for her dedication to our community. Well, let's hear now from Dr. Eva M. Doyle. Take it away.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this program today. I really appreciate the opportunity. I have to say that this month, Black History Month, February, is very important to me because it marks the 44th anniversary of my column, Eye on History. For 44 years, it has never missed a week being published in Buffalo and Western New York. So I'm celebrating that today. It's been a long time, as you started in the Challenger newspaper, and it is today in Buffalo by the Merriweather family. And the Criterion is 100 years old. I have to say that. And I thank them for giving me the opportunity to continue to write Eye on History. Eye on History is my trademark. If you see that anywhere in my billboards, which I do around the city, all over Western New York, you will always see Eye on History. When I was teaching in the Buffalo Public Schools, I taught for 30 years. And I was known for two things. I was known for teaching African and African American history from September to June. I was also known for being successful with at-risk students, especially Black males who are having a hard time in the classroom. As a matter of fact, the principal would always give me students that other teachers could not handle in their classroom. So, but I had a diverse classroom. I had African American students, I had white students, I had students with handicapping conditions. And once and I never was trained to do this. I was asked to take a blind student in my classroom. I didn't have any instruction when I was training to become a teacher. Her name was Annie. I will never forget Annie. Annie came into my classroom with a braille machine and an aide to help her, and she was a straight A student. I had to learn how to include her in the classroom. And I was able to do that, and it was a very successful time. So I've had a lot of experience. I'm supposed to be retired. I don't know what that word retired really means, because when I retired in 2004, I stayed home about 6 months, and then I decided I can't sit home and just watch television. I have to get out in the community, and I had to continue to teach. And I consider the entire Western New York area in Erie County my classroom. I say that all the time because I teach everywhere I go. The Meriwether Library is my favorite library to go, but I love all the libraries. I have been going to the library since I was about 10 years old. I love the library. I My teenage years, I grew up in the old Talbot Mall projects on the corner of Jefferson and Clinton. And every Saturday, I would walk down Clinton Street to the library and come home with an arm full of books. We had a small apartment, but I had a small area. I would sit there and I would read. And a lot of people would be surprised what I read in those days. I didn't read history. I'm a historian, but I really didn't read history. I read every book that Earl Stanley Garden wrote about Perry Mason. That got me started. And it led to me continuing to read and exploring all kinds. I love the library. Everywhere I go, I talk about the library. Last week, on February 15th, I taught an after school class at the Performing Arts Academy on East Ferry in Maston. And I had about 30 students in the class. And I talked about the libraries and reading. And I did lessons on African American history. Whenever I do lessons on African American history, I always try to give information to our youth and adults about things they perhaps has never learned before, that they did not get in their own education. I think it's important. If you have knowledge, no matter what it is, I think if you can, I think it's important that people share that knowledge. I describe my column, Eye on History, as the only weekly column on African American history in Western New York. And it takes a lot of work. People will see that column. Right now, I'm doing a series in the Buffalo News, and I thank the Buffalo News for giving me the opportunity to publish my column every Sunday for Black History Month. This is the 14th year that they are publishing my column. And I always try to share information in that column about people that many people and events that people perhaps have never heard before. That's my mission. That's my mission, to talk about things that are not there. Now, I actually started this when I taught first grade at Campus West many years ago. Campus West was a school located on the campus of Buffalo State College. It has since closed, but I taught first and second graders in the same room in those days. And that was something I had to get used to. But at that time, Buffalo was celebrating their history, over 150 years of history. So I went to our school library because I wanted to find a book about African Americans in the city of Buffalo. When I went to the school library and there was no book. I went to other libraries at that time that there were not a lot of books. So I got the idea to go across to the Buffalo History Museum, as it's called today. They didn't have a book either. What they did have, they had a file system of various articles. And I started to read and research, and they came back. And I'm going to try to hold this book up because of my first book. I wrote this book, and I just hold it up quickly. I wrote this little book when I taught first and second grade. This book is 40 years old. I wrote it in 1982. It's called Buffalo's Black Community. It is only a 20-page book, but it has a lot of history. And I wrote it for children. But when adults read the book, they would say this, well, Mr. Doyle, I don't know that information either, because it talked about the first Black man to ever come to Buffalo. His name was Joseph Hodge. Joseph Hodge was so helpful to the early white settlers. This is before Buffalo was incorporated into a city. And he served as a guide. He married a Seneca woman who he spoke the language of the Senecas. And so I talked about this. And I said I read it to my first and second graders, and I said Jefferson Avenue was not always called Jefferson Avenue. At one time, it was called Pollard Street. And there were no Black people on Jefferson at that time. It was mostly the German community. And at the end of Jefferson, there was a big park where the old Sears used to be, called Luna Park. So those are the things I took, but it took a lot of research. It's only a 20, and it took me 6 months to write it. I always told my students this: if you write history or you talk about history, you have to do your research. You have to document what you write about or what you say, because somebody somewhere may ask you a question. Well, how do you know? Where did you get the information from? So it took me a long time to put this 20 and this, and this book has really been sold over and over again, because every year when I go to the Juneteenth festival for over 25 years, I was a vendor, and I would always have my books. And this book was the one that people would always ask for. Um, and I had another book called Eye on History. I'm trying to go over this as quickly as I can because I have so much to share with you. But in 2021, I wrote my 12th book. And the name of that book is Eye on History, The Golden Collection, Articles on African and African American History, Lost History, Forgotten History. And this book has gone all over Western New York. And I'm proud to say it is in our Buffalo and Erie County public libraries. And I really appreciate having that opportunity. So what good is to write a book and nobody is going to read it? So people have been reading the book and sharing information. And when I write those articles for the news, I have to share this with you because it takes so much time to do this. This last article, the one that's coming up Sunday, because I'm doing a series of articles on African American doctors and healers who have made contributions to our healthcare system. And the one that's coming up this Sunday is about a man named Vivian Theodore Thomas. I had never heard about him before. I started writing this article Sunday afternoon at about 5 o'clock. I didn't finish writing it until 3 o'clock Monday morning. because I never heard of him before. And I had to do so much research. I rely on reading as many books as I can. And when I was doing these articles on the African American doctors like Dr. Charles R. Drew, who established the banks for the Red Cross, Dr. Daniel Hale Williams Jr., who did the first successful open heart surgery. I knew a little bit about them, but when I really went into their history very deeply, I learned things about them I didn't know before. And it was really interesting. Now, the one that's coming out this coming Sunday about Vivian Theodore Thomas, he was a researcher. He was not a surgeon, but he trained surgeons. He trained some of the most well-known surgeons in our history. And he actually started out as a janitor at Johns Hopkins University. He was a grandson of a slave. He went from being a janitor to being a researcher and ended up being the director of surgery. And so I don't want to spoil it because I want you to read the article. It's coming out Sunday. And it took me 7 hours to really, when I finished writing that article at 3 o'clock Monday morning, I almost collapsed over my computer. It was exhausting. It really was exhausting to put it together, to find all this information. I try not to use the internet too much. I use it sometimes I rather read the books. I rather take a deep dive into the books and put it all together. And I want to thank the librarians of our Buffalo and Erie County public library system. They have been so helpful to me. Sometimes I would call and I would say, I'm looking for this book or I'm looking for that book, and they would help me trace these books down. One time I wrote a book and they didn't have it, but they used interlibrary loans system, and the book was in California. And they were able to order the book for me. And I was able to write this book here, and I'm going to hold it up and read the title. It was the history of President Warren Gamaliel Harding. And I knew I had read somewhere that he had African ancestry. And so that particular book helped me put it all together, and other books as well. And I have to tell you a secret about this book. I actually wrote this book at the library. And I spent so much time there at the library. I wrote it came out, I finished it in February 2008. I never will forget it. And I talked about this book on one of the radio stations. And the reporter asked me a question. Where did you get the information? And I answered it. As a matter of fact, the reporter came to my house and wanted to know about this book and how did I know that he had African ancestry. But I sat in the library, and the Buffalo News actually covered this. I got permission from the administrators in 2008. They came in and they actually did a story on me. And every week I would go to the library and I would put together all this information to write this book. And it was absolutely amazing. And I have to say this, one of the resources I use at the library, I use the rare book room a lot. I would call and make an appointment and go in. And I will go in and and I will go and I would call the libraries, and they were so helpful. They would help me to find the books I was looking for. One time I was asked to do a lecture on the history of the Honorable Shirley A. Chisholm, who was the first Black woman to run for president of the United States in 1982. And the rare book room had something I didn't know they had it, but the libraries helped me find it because she taught at Buffalo State College, and they had a series of tapes of her lectures. There were 12 of them, 12 of them. I would go to the library every other week or so before I did the lecture. I would sit in that room and I would listen to those tapes. She lectured about Black women in business, in education, in health, uh, in politics, community service. Those tapes were in the rare book room. There's so many good things at the library. Once I was looking for a publication that was done by the founder of Black History Month, Dr. Carter G. Woodson. He is called the father of Black history. I was looking for the Negro History Bulletin that he published back in the 1930s and 1940s, and the librarians helped me find it. They had copies in the stack room. You couldn't take them out. I had to use everything there at the library. But so these resources have been so helpful to me in my journey of teaching about African and the contributions of African and African American history. And when I talked to the students last week at the Performing Arts Academy, I would ask them different questions, and they were so enthusiastic. I used African American history too to teach reading, to teach science, the language arts, and so many other areas. And I think I'm getting to. Am I getting to the end? um, okay, let me know. Okay, okay. How many more minutes do I have?
Well, we really want to see if our audience has some questions, because I know
Okay,
you could go on for a long time on this subject.
I could go on
It would be
for
wonderful.
5 hours.
It would be wonderful to do.
Yes,
The
yes,
idea
yes,
of lifelong learning is something that I've often thought, how, if you were to imagine a community that was healthy, was wealthy, was sustainable, you would have to have lifelong learning at the foundation of that community.
yes.
You would have to do it. And you emulate that so well with just the work that goes into creating one column. This is how you build this notion of, hey, I got my high school degree, hey, I got my college degree, and I'm done now. Just doesn't work in the 21st century. So my hat's off to you for summarizing that as best as possible. What,
Thank you.
Kate, do we have any questions from our audience?
So we don't have any questions yet, but I just wanted to mention, Dr. Doyle, when I was at Campus West and you mentioned your student Annie in the beginning, I actually remember her. She was in one of my classes. Yeah.
She was
Yeah.
such a good student.
I
She taught
know.
me. She really did.
Yeah,
You left an impression.
for
Dr.
sure.
Doyle.
Definitely.
You left an impression. Good, because this allows us to go ahead and summarize. I asked you at the beginning, before we started the program, what would be your bottom line message that in this presentation you want to leave with your audience? What's the essence of what you hope people get by having watched this, listen to you at this point in time. Summarize that for us.
Well, my motto is learning is a lifelong process. You can never learn it all. I enjoy reading, and I read I don't just read African American history books. I read all kinds of things. And I have a birthday coming up in next month, and I am an elder in the community, but reading keeps my mind going. It keeps me going. It gives me a reason to get up every morning. And so I think I would just tell people, just and enjoy whatever you want to read. Because I started out reading Earl Stanley Gardner. And when I was in the classroom, I allowed my students to read what they wanted to read, encourage them to motivate them to read. So that would be my message. Just remember that reading and learning go hand in hand. I would put it like this: reading, learning, and writing. Those are the three things that keep me going. That would be my message.
That's a good message. That's a good message. How about the Buffalo history aspect?
Yes.
Part of I reference a thought process of saying that we need place-based lifelong learning. That you started in your own backyard, and from there suddenly you can capture and connect with the universe literally from your own backyard.
Yes, there's so much history in the city of Buffalo, and I'm glad to see um, many groups, not just African Americans, but I think people of all racial backgrounds and cultures, they're beginning to realize their own history is important. I've done my own research on my family history. I was able to trace my family history back to 1846, and I'm writing a book about that. I have 4 more books in my head to write. I hope the good Lord gives me the time to write those books.
We do too. Kate,
Yeah, we
hopefully
do have,
we provoke some questions.
yeah, we do have one question. Do you have any other favorite history resources or authors in Buffalo?
Yes, uh, Dr. Barbara Nevergold and Dr. Peggy Brooks Bertram. They are the coordinators and the creators of the Uncrowned Queens Institute. And though they both have done a lot of writing themselves when it comes to the contributions of African American history, um, Dr. Nevergold just did a piece on the first Black teacher in the city of Buffalo, Ida B. Fairbush, who she taught at the old school 6. I actually was a student, not during the time she taught there, but I didn't know that she was the first Black teacher in Buffalo. So they have done, and um, Mrs. Eva Knowles. We have the first name Eva. Her last name was Knowles. She's deceased, but she wrote a book about Buffalo's history of Blacks in the city of Buffalo. So there are a lot of authors, and I'm glad to see that their publications are now being recognized. Yes.
Thank you. I don't have any other right now, but there is a comment. Thank you, and thank you for your amazing work.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
And that's a good way to close it up. With that, thank you. You're an amazing woman. It's as simple as that. You dedicated your life to an idea, and the beneficiary of that is the entire community, your classroom, as you call it, all of Western Europe.
Yes, everywhere I go.
And well beyond, though, well beyond, I suspect. And it's being archived today, at least with this program at the library, as they archive all of the virtual programs that we've been doing for the last couple of years. And we appreciate you adding to that collection, if you will. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Now, folks, thank you for joining us today. We'll see you back here on Zoom next Tuesday as we hear from Samina Raja. Dr. Samina Raja is a professor at the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at the University at Buffalo. I'm Dennis Galucki. Be well and good day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.